In a modest home filled with tradition and expectation, we meet David, a father whose love is selective, reserved solely for his son, Paul, the heir he believes will carry on his legacy. His daughter Hannah is an afterthought, dismissed, disregarded, and devalued simply because of her gender. To David, she's a girl destined to leave the family, not someone worth investing in, but in the shadows of her father's neglect, Hannah refuses to be broken. With the quiet support of her mother, Agnes, she perseveres, driven not by revenge, but by a desire to prove her worth. As the years unfold, Paul, once the favored son, begins to crumble under the pressure of expectations he never chose, while Hannah soars on the wings of her own hard-earned success. This is a story about broken dreams, rediscovered hope, and the courage it takes to challenge deep-rooted bias. It's about how love, when withheld, can wound, but also how healing begins when someone dares to break the cycle. The evening sun dipped behind the horizon as David stepped into his home, arms laden with gifts. His son, Paul, rushed to meet him, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Dad, is this for me?" Paul asked, fingers already reaching for the packages. David chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Yes, my boy. Everything here is for you." Paul grinned, but hesitated before glancing toward his sister, Hannah, who stood by the doorway, watching silently. "What about Hannah?" David's expression hardened in an instant. "Don't worry about her," he said dismissively. "She can take care of herself. One day, she'll get married and belong to another family. I will not waste my money on a daughter who won't even carry my name." Hannah's heart clenched at her father's cruel words. Tears pricked her eyes, but before they could fall, her mother, Agnes, pulled her into a comforting embrace. "Don't cry, my love," Agnes whispered. "One day, you will prove him wrong." Hannah wanted to believe her mother's words, but how could she? Every day, she watched her father shower Paul with love, attention, and gifts while she remained invisible in his eyes. David never paid for her school fees, never asked how she was doing, and never even acknowledged her existence beyond irritation. That night, as Paul excitedly played with his new toys, Hannah sat quietly in the corner watching. It wasn't the gifts she longed for, it was her father's love. Months passed, and Paul prepared for his final college exams. David was confident that his son would make him proud after all the support he provided, money, encouragement, and private lessons. But when the results came, David's world shattered. Paul had failed his exams. The house fell silent for a long moment before David's rage erupted like a storm. "Paul," he roared, "how could you fail after everything I've done for you? I gave you everything you needed. I invested in you, and you repay me with failure." Paul's head hung low in shame. "Dad, I think I don't have a passion for education. I try, but I learn slowly," Paul said, his voice trembling. David's eyes darkened with fury. "Nonsense. You're just lazy. I will not have a failure for a son. I'll hire another tutor. You will pass next time." Agnes stepped in, placing a gentle hand on David's arm. "David, maybe Paul's strengths lie elsewhere. Perhaps we should—" "Enough," David snapped. "I won't tolerate this nonsense." Despite the extra lessons, Paul failed his exams again. On the same day, Hannah returned home with an envelope in her hands. She stood in the living room, gripping the letter while her family sat in tense silence, her heart pounding. "I got a scholarship," she announced, voice steady yet filled with emotion. "I was the best student in my school. They're sending me abroad to study." Agnes gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, my daughter, I knew you could do it." She rushed forward and pulled Hannah into a tight embrace, but David sat frozen, his expression unreadable, his fingers clenched around the armrest of his chair, his knuckles turning white. "How?" he muttered under his breath. "How did you?" "I worked hard, Dad," Hannah replied, unwavering. "Even without your support, I studied day and night. I had to prove that I was worth something." David's pride had been shattered. The son he had invested in had failed him, while the daughter he had ignored was now leaving for a better life. "I can't believe this," he muttered, shaking his head. "A girl getting a scholarship? A girl?" Agnes stepped toward her husband, anger lighting her features. "Hannah didn't get this scholarship because she's a girl. She earned it. She worked harder than anyone else. Unlike you, I never doubted her." David's nostrils flared, but he said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. The days leading to Hannah's departure were a whirlwind. She prepared for the airport, her heart heavy yet excited for the new life that awaited her. Agnes helped her pack, slipping small notes of encouragement between her clothes. On the day of her departure, Paul hugged her tightly. "Take care, okay?" he whispered. "I will," Hannah promised. "And Paul, don't give up. You'll find your own path." Paul nodded, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling of failure. He had always been his father's pride, yet now he felt like a shadow behind Hannah's success. David, however, refused to come to the airport. He sat in his chair, staring at the wall, refusing to acknowledge her departure. As Hannah wheeled her suitcase to the door, she paused. "Goodbye, Dad," she said softly. No response. With a final glance at her childhood home, she walked out, stepping into a future her father never believed she could have. But life has a way of proving people wrong. The house felt emptier after Hannah left. Agnes noticed it first. The unsettling silence, the absence of Hannah's laughter, the missing presence of someone who had fought so hard to belong. David, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had changed. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Hannah, thousands of miles away, embraced her new life. The moment she stepped into her university in the United States, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. She was no longer just David's unwanted daughter. She was Hannah, the best student, the scholar, the girl who had defied all odds. Back home, things were falling apart. Paul, once the golden child, struggled under the weight of his father's expectations. After failing his exams twice, he lost all motivation. He tried applying to other schools, but without good grades, his chances were slim. One evening, as David sat staring blankly at the television, Paul finally gathered his courage to speak. "Dad," he said hesitantly. David didn't look away from the screen. "What is it?" "I don't think university is for me," Paul admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I learn slowly. Maybe I should try something else. A trade, a business." David snapped his head toward his son, his face contorted with rage. "A trade? A business? Are you saying you want to become a common laborer?" Paul swallowed hard. "Dad, I don't think I can keep disappointing you. I don't want to waste your money anymore." David slammed his fist against the table. "You are my son. You have no choice but to succeed. Do you think I worked hard all these years just to have a son who gives up?" Paul lowered his gaze. "But you never treated Hannah like this." The words hit David like a slap. He stood up, face red with anger. "Don't you ever compare yourself to that girl?" He stopped himself, breathing heavily. That girl, Hannah, had left with nothing. No support, no money, no encouragement. Yet she had risen higher than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Paul, his beloved son, whom he had given everything to, was crumbling before his eyes. That night, David sat in silence, staring at the framed photo of his children on the wall. Doubt crept into his mind for the first time. Had he been wrong all along? Meanwhile, Hannah was excelling in her studies. She met professors who believed in her, friends who supported her, and mentors who saw her potential. Yet she never forgot where she came from. One night, as she lay in her dorm room, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Paul. "Hannah, I don't know what to do anymore. Dad is disappointed in me. I feel like a failure." Hannah's heart ached. Her father had created this mess, but could she help her brother escape it? Without hesitation, she called him. Paul picked up on the second ring, his voice weak and defeated. "Hannah," he said, "I feel like a failure." She said firmly, "You are not a failure." He let out a dry chuckle. "Tell that to Dad. No matter what I do, I'll never be good enough for him. I've failed twice. I don't think I'm meant for school." Hannah's heart ached. Paul had always been their father's pride, but now that he was struggling, David was turning his back on him just like he had done to her. "Listen to me," she urged. "You don't have to live for Dad. You have to live for yourself. If school isn't your path, then find what is. What do you want to do?" Paul was silent for a long time. Finally, he admitted, "I like fixing things. Machines, electronics. I like understanding how they work." Hannah smiled. "Then maybe university isn't for you. Maybe you're meant for something more hands-on, like engineering or technical work. Have you thought about that?" Paul sighed. "Dad would never allow it." "Then stop waiting for his permission," she insisted. "You need to start making decisions for yourself." Paul didn't respond, but Hannah could tell her words had struck a chord with him. After they hung up, Hannah sat in silence, deep in thought. She wanted to help her brother, but she was miles away. An idea came to her. The next morning, she reached out to one of her professors, a man with connections in various industries. She asked him about technical schools or apprenticeships that could help Paul find his path. Back home, things were getting worse. David had grown colder toward Paul, barely speaking to him. The once proud father now avoided his son, as if ashamed of him. Agnes tried to mediate, but David refused to listen. One evening, Paul came home to find David sitting in the living room, staring at old documents. He looked up as Paul walked in. "What are you doing with your life?" David asked bitterly. Paul clenched his fists. "I'm figuring it out." "Figuring it out?" David scoffed. "You had everything handed to you, and you failed." Paul felt anger bubble inside him, but instead of lashing out, he calmly replied, "Maybe if you had supported Hannah, she wouldn't have had to prove you wrong. And maybe if you supported me now, I wouldn't feel so lost." David's face twisted with guilt, but he said nothing. That night, Paul received a message from Hannah. "I found something for you. A technical school where you can learn engineering and mechanics. It's fully funded. If you want it, it's yours." Paul stared at the message, heart pounding. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. The next morning, he found his mother in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Mom," he said carefully, "I need to talk to you." Agnes turned, sensing the seriousness in his voice. "What is it, my son?" "I want to go to this technical school Hannah found for me. I want to study engineering and mechanics. It's what I love." Agnes's face softened with emotion. "Oh, Paul, I've always known you had a gift for fixing things." She touched his cheek gently. "If this is what makes you happy, then go for it." Paul felt a weight lift off his chest, but there was still one more person he had to face: David. That evening, Paul found his father sitting in his usual chair, reading the newspaper. His heart pounded as he stepped forward. "Dad, I need to tell you something." David didn't look up. "What now?" "I've decided to go to a technical school. I want to learn engineering and mechanics." David's eyes slowly lifted from the paper. "Oh, you're serious?" "Yes," Paul said firmly. "Hannah helped me find a program. It's already funded, and I start next month." David let out a bitter laugh. "So now you're taking advice from her? A girl who abandoned her family?" Paul's jaw clenched. "She didn't abandon us. She worked hard and succeeded. The only difference is you never supported her, just like you're not supporting me now." David's face darkened. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." "No, Dad," Paul said, his voice steady. "You gave me what you wanted me to have, not what I needed. You pushed me toward a life that didn't fit me, but I'm done trying to be the son you expect me to be. I'm choosing my own path." David stared at him, speechless. For the first time, his son was standing up to him, not with anger, but with certainty. Paul turned away. "I start next month, whether you approve or not." David watched as his son walked away, a strange emptiness settling in his chest. First, Hannah had proven him wrong. Now Paul was doing the same. For the first time in his life, David began to wonder, had he been the failure all along? Days passed, and Paul prepared to leave for technical school. Unlike before, he felt hopeful, excited even. He He no longer had to carry the burden of trying to please his father. Agnes was proud of him, but she noticed the way David watched from the sidelines, saw the storm in her husband's eyes, the realization that he had pushed both his children away. One evening, she sat beside him. "David," she said gently, "it's not too late." David scoffed. Too late for what? To fix things, to support Paul, to make peace with Hannah. David clenched his jaw. "She wouldn't want to hear from me." Agnes sighed. "You don't know that." That night, David sat alone, staring at his phone. He scrolled through old messages from Paul and Agnes, but there were none from Hannah, not one. It wasn't that she had never sent him messages, she simply never had a reason to. Finally, he did something he never imagined himself doing. He typed a message. "Hannah, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry." He hesitated before pressing send, his hands trembling. Minutes passed, then an hour, and finally his phone buzzed with a reply. "Dad, I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to be there. But if you truly mean this, then maybe we can start over." David's throat tightened. He had spent years convincing himself that Hannah didn't matter, yet here she was, inviting him back into her life. As he looked back on all that had happened, he began to understand that perhaps it was never too late to start anew. In the end, this isn't just a story about favoritism or failure, it's about growth and the power of choosing a different path. Hannah, once overlooked and dismissed, found strength in herself and created a life beyond what anyone imagined. Paul, burdened by expectations he never asked for, learned that it's okay to follow a different dream, one that's his own. And David, a father set in his ways, was finally forced to face the consequences of the love he withheld and the harm he caused. But even the deepest wounds can begin to heal with a single act of courage, an apology, a conversation, a choice to do better. Redemption doesn't come all at once. It comes in small moments of honesty, vulnerability, and change. This story reminds us that it's never too late to make things right, that love should never be conditional, and that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who rise the highest. In the silence that follows, there is reflection. In the space between regret and hope, there is possibility. And in choosing to do better, there is the beginning of something new.